you don't speak. Stop saying your English is not good. Stop saying you're a beginner when you're not. Stop it. Hey guys, welcome back to another video with Lau. This is going to be 100% in English. You guys liked the last one, so here's another one. If you understand most or all of what I say, congratulations, your English is pretty great. I am not speaking slower or more clearly or anything like that. This is how I really talk, okay? This is how I talk to my friends and my family. This is how I talk with native speakers. This is how I talk. This is normal, all right? If you think it's easy, if you think it's slow, it's just because your English level is higher than you think, and that's related to the topic of this video today. So real quick, before we get into the topic of the video, I just want to say something that actually kind of relates to the topic of the video, but well, you'll see. I've received a few comments saying that they think that I am arrogant when I say things like, hey, welcome back to another video with your favorite English teacher. For me, with the sense of humor that I have and how I grew up, that is so obviously a joke. But if there's one lesson to take away from me, there's one lesson to learn from me in life, it's not even about English. It's that you shouldn't take life so seriously. And also, you got to understand that we have a lot of different kinds of humor. Like some people like me are very sarcastic and ironic, and we have like dry humor. Also, I think people are commonly mistaking confidence with arrogance. There's a big distinction there, and that's related to the topic of this video today, which is like people think that their English is worse than it really is. I think it's important to celebrate yourself, to celebrate your achievements, to not talk down about yourself, to love yourself, and to be confident. That's one of the most attractive things. I mean, that's like the key to life, is like literally just be confident. Like if you believe you can do something, you're more likely to do it than if you don't believe it. Anyways, I gave private English classes for like, God, I don't even know, like 5 years or something, like approximately 5 years. And the private classes, like on WhatsApp, like talking on the phone, conversation classes in English, probably more than half of the people, or if not like most of the people, they thought that their English was worse than it really was. And I told them all, I was like, your English is better than you think. I don't care about tests A1, B2. They'd always ask me like, what's my level? Which one of those? I don't know. I just judge it like this. The more you can hold a conversation with me and you understand me and I understand you and we can talk about all these different topics easily, like effortlessly, your English is great. You're going to make mistakes. Like that's going to happen. You just have to accept you're going to make mistakes. Advanced students make mistakes. Fluent speakers make mistakes. But if you can use your English, that's the whole point of learning it, is like to use it, to talk to people. If you can do that, fantastic. There's always room for improvement. I always can improve my Spanish, but for the most part, I can use it for what I need to use it for. Like I can use it to communicate with people in the ways that I want to, and it's sufficient for that. You know, people would message me about the classes and I said, you have to be able to have a conversation to take this class with me. This class is not for beginners. And multiple students would say, well, I'm a beginner. And I said, well, can you have a conversation in English? Like even a simple conversation. And they're like, yeah. And then we'd have the class and some of them had super great conversations with me and all in English. And I'm like, you're not a beginner. Why do you think you're a beginner? A beginner is like somebody who's like learning like cat and dog and I see a dog and I saw a cat yesterday, like learning the basic stuff like that. Like you can't have a conversation yet. If you can have a conversation, you're not a beginner. I don't care what the tests say. So in general, your English is probably better than you realize. A lot of times our judgments of ourselves, or maybe all the time, our judgments of ourselves come from comparing to other people. And in the case of a student learning English, there's a lot of people in the world who are learning English. There's a lot of people to compare yourself to. So I can see how it could be hard to think that your English is good when there's so many people who might speak better than you. But just because someone can speak better than you doesn't mean your English isn't good, you see? And I received a lot of comments in the last video saying like, yeah, I understand almost everything you're saying, but the problem is I don't speak. I'm gonna say this once and only once. You don't speak because you're not speaking. Duh. Whatever it is that you want to be better at, you literally have to do it. Like you're obsessed with it. You have to do it a lot. If you haven't seen my video about how I learned Spanish, well, that video is in Spanish, but basically I said that you can do 90% of your speaking practice just by yourself in your room using the internet and being creative. The other 10%, you can take classes on a website like italki.com with native speakers. You can have conversation classes with native speakers. By the way, I'm going to put a link in the comments. Click on that. It will take you to the italki website. You can make an account on italki, and after you buy your first class, you will get $10 toward your next class. So if you buy one class, you could get the second class basically free. So it's a really great deal. I really recommend it. Go click on the link below and take your first class on italki. If you have a conversation with a native speaker, you might realize that your English is actually better than you thought. A lot of you, most of you, are probably not getting enough contact with native speakers. speakers, especially native speakers who correct you and help you and answer your questions all the time. The people who work on these websites, they do this all the time. So they're expecting you to make mistakes. They are very patient. It's basically your own private like tutor that you can talk to that can give you all the tips and everything. So highly recommend that. Multiple people who grew up in Hispanic countries told me that when they were a kid, other kids would like make fun of you or like tease you for speaking English or for speaking English like correctly. That is mind-blowing to me. That is crazy. In my experience growing up in the United States, in school, in like Spanish class, if you knew more Spanish than the other kids, or if you could pronounce Spanish like more correctly, the other kids probably just thought it was cool. Maybe they were jealous. Maybe they were just surprised. I was always like this kid in the class that knew the most Spanish just because I was genuinely interested in it and I was good at doing the pronunciation. So I remember in high school, I had this one teacher who would ask us questions in Spanish. And you know, the other students are like, ¿puedes repetir, por favor? But the teacher would ask me a question and I would be like, ¿puedes decirme otra vez? And all the other kids would be silent. So I don't know how many of you experienced this kind of situation that a friend of mine from Argentina described to me about how kids would make fun of other kids. I don't know how many of you experienced that. You can tell me in the comments if that was your experience or not. But if that's the case, then from the time when you were a kid, you had this kind of mental block to not speak English correctly or to not improve your English. And I think as an adult, you have this mental block that if you don't speak English fluently, or if you don't speak English perfectly, then you don't speak English. And that's just totally false. I'm going to tell you something funny that I noticed. Gringos, in my experience, are much more likely to say that their Spanish is better than it really is. Sometimes they say it's way better than it really is. I personally have very high standards for Spanish because I hold myself to high standards. I've heard gringos say that they're fluent in Spanish when they sound like me 6-7 years ago. I've heard gringos say that they speak Spanish or they know somebody who speaks Spanish, but they wouldn't say that they're fluent, but they know Spanish, but they wouldn't say that they're fluent, almost as if they are like an intermediate level, when in reality, they're like complete beginners. They know like basic vocabulary words and that's it. And you could say it's like an ego problem. I definitely do think that there is an ego problem in the United States, but I think in this case, it's not even that. I think it was just the fact that a lot of us were raised with this idea of like, you can do it, you can do it, you can achieve anything. You're good at many things. Look at all of this stuff that you've learned. So you can say that you know it. I think these people are just very confident. When they're actually in a situation where the Spanish is difficult, the situation will show them how much they really know. So we don't have to be concerned with them thinking that they're better than they really are, because the situation, real life experience will show, it will teach them, it will show them where their level is and what they need to work on. We don't need to worry about that. And like I said before, most English students think that their English is worse than it really is, and they lack confidence in their English. And so you see this interesting thing where, you know, the gringo is going to Mexico and is so confident in his Spanish, but the Mexican is going to the United States and is not confident in his English. And this brings me to my next point. It is a serious problem how these two individuals are treated differently. The Mexican is expected to know English and he's not celebrated or complimented for his English ability. Meanwhile, the gringo can show up and have a very, very basic conversation with halfway decent pronunciation and the people say, "Oh, your Spanish is so good." That is a problem, and I'm not saying anything new. I think you guys know that that's a problem and it's not fair and it's messed up. Yeah, it is. So what can we do about it? Two things. First, you can not be so quick to compliment and celebrate foreigners who come to your country and speak your language. Very mediocre. And even people like me with the level of Spanish that I have, I've heard a million times my Spanish is good. I don't need people to keep telling me that. So really, if you never compliment them on their Spanish skills and you just talk to them like a normal person and just be like a normal, nice person and have a conversation with them, that's totally fine. That will make them very happy. You don't need to be like, wow, your Spanish is so good. Just have a normal conversation with them. The second thing that you can do, which is even more important than the first thing, unfortunately, it's out of our control to change the way that a lot of people in the US perceive foreigners coming in and trying to speak English. We don't have control over that. But what we can do and what you can do is give all of that love and compliments and celebration and appreciation to yourself and to others around you. Think about the gringos that get compliments for their Spanish. Think about how well they actually speak Spanish. Some of them speak pretty good, but some of them don't. Now think about your English. Is your English as good as some of their Spanish? Is it better? You should be celebrating yourself in the same way, if not more. I'm talking about a specific topic now, but this really is a general life lesson as well, to not look for validation in others, but to give it to yourself. I think if we just focus on trying to do the best we can and trying to learn and study and work on things, and we don't focus so much on what's my level, is it good, is it bad? Most of you watching, if not all of you, are probably people who, like me, learned another language or started studying a language seriously to be fluent in their adult life. We can reach a very high level in the language. We can even call ourselves bilingual and fluent, but we will never be like native speakers. And remember that kids who grew up with at least a significant portion of their childhood in the school system of a particular country, they are native speakers in that language, even if it's not their first language. All of the Hispanic kids that are growing up in the US in households where their family talks to them in Spanish, and that was their first language that they had contact with, but in school and outside of the house, it's all in English. These kids that are growing up bilingual are native speakers in English. It might be a struggle in the beginning. It might be hard. They might suffer to adapt to this new language at school. But after a few years, they're going to be talking just like all the other kids in the class. And when they're adults, they're going to speak English just like I speak English. Obviously, there's subtle differences between the ways that native speakers speak, but they're going to be a native speaker. Another example of this is the famous YouTuber, Super Holly. I watched one of her videos where she talks about all of her years of school and where she was. I think I counted like 8 years of school she spent in Mexico, in the Mexican school system. And then other years she spent in the US, and obviously her parents at home speak English. That's why she's both Mexican and gringa. That's why she speaks Spanish like a Mexican, because she is a Mexican. Even though there's currently 12 million bilingual kids growing up in the United States, nobody's shocked when they speak English exactly like native speakers when they're adults, but still there's a lot of people shocked about Super Holly. I don't know why. I don't know if people just don't know her story, or it's just because of the way she looks. Because there's a Colombian artist, Kali Uchis, who grew up like a part of her childhood in Colombia, a part in the United States. And yeah, she's bilingual. She's fluent in both. But because she looks Colombian, nobody's like shocked that her English is so perfect. Because yeah, she also grew up going to school in the US too. But yeah, no hate to Super Holly. It's not her fault, but it's just an example of the way that it's unfair how Hispanics are never appreciated for their English, but then gringos are just put on a pedestal for their Spanish. It's just bullcrap. I don't like it. It annoys me. Anyways, to conclude this video, the bottom line really is just that I want you to be more confident in your English. I want you to celebrate all that you've achieved, all that you've learned in English. And I want to remind you that you probably know more than you think. Your English is probably better than you realize. And after reading the comments on my other video where I was talking in English, I realized that a lot of you have very high level in English listening comprehension. And that's amazing. What you need to do is speak. You need to speak a lot. And you can't wait for a real life face-to-face experience to talk and practice your English. You need to talk out loud when you're alone. You need to talk out loud to your computer. You need to take classes online with native speakers. italki discount link in the comments. The only way to get better at something is to simply do it. You have to do it. There's no other way. Absolutely no other way. And also some of you said in the comments that it was a lot easier to understand my video than movies, for example. Yeah, YouTube videos are always going to be easier to understand than movies. Number one. Number two, a monologue is always going to be easier to understand than a dialogue. Number three, somebody explaining something, just talking about a topic, is going to be easier to understand than like a quick back and forth that's like constantly changing the topic and stuff. So yeah, movies can be a tool to help you improve your listening in English, but I really recommend YouTube videos as being your #1 tool. All right, that's basically all I want to say in this video. It was a lot. I really hope that you felt inspired and maybe it helped change your perspective on something. And as always, let me know in the comments what you thought of the video and what you would like me to talk about in a future video. And remember, I am your favorite English teacher. Breathe, let it out. Inhale, exhale. It's gonna be okay. I am your favorite English teacher. I hold myself to high standards as your favorite English teacher. I will try to do my very best. Okay, I'm just procrastinating at this point. Bye. I just don't want to end the video. If you've watched until this point, thank you very much. All right, love you. I mean, yeah, I guess I love you. All right, gotta go. Bye, bye, bye. Have you ever been frustrated because you understand people speaking English like me on YouTube, but then you watch TV shows and movies and you don't understand anything? Yeah, same. In this video, I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you.
After a few months of studying English intensely, my reading skills and even vocabulary improved a lot. It got to a point where I could understand most of what I read. But whenever I tried to watch a movie in English, I was always amazed at how fast native speakers spoke. And of course, it was really difficult to understand what they were saying without subtitles. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you how I went from understanding very little to understanding pretty much everything most native speakers say nowadays. I'm also going to give you some tips on how you can improve your listening skills significantly. So, stick around because today's episode is going to be fun. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. How have you been? Hope you've been doing well. In case you're new here, this podcast is intended to help intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, subscribe to the channel if you are on YouTube, or follow the show if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That way, you won't miss a single new episode. So, understanding what native speakers say, improving your listening skills. Most native speakers, okay? And I was even intentional with that. I made a point, I made sure I included the word most in the title of this video. Because when I say understanding native speakers and my ability to do so, I'm talking about most native speakers that speak more standardized versions of English. So I'm talking about the American English you hear in movies, podcasts, and TV series, for example. I'm talking about the British English that you hear on BBC or also in other types of media, okay? I am not talking about very specific regional accents that are actually dialects of the English language. Even native speakers themselves, depending on the regions, they might struggle to understand themselves if it's something really regional. I'm not talking about that, all right? So when I say understanding native speakers, I'm talking about understanding the most popular and standard variations of the English language. Now that I've made myself very clear on that point, let's get started. So, to me, of course, lots of exposure was key. And when I say exposure, I mean listening. Listening to English, listening to native speakers speaking in media over a long period of time. I mean, I started studying English when I was 15. I'm almost 40 now, so it's been over 20 years that I've been. I mean, lots of exposure to, on that point, variations of the English language. Now that I've made myself very clear on that point, let's get started. So, to me, of course, lots of exposure was key. And when I say exposure, I mean listening. Listening to English, listening to native speakers speaking in media over a long period of time. I mean, I started studying English when I was 15. I'm almost 40 now, so it's been over 20 years that I've been on this journey. So it's more than 20 years listening constantly to English media, to native speakers, you know? So it does compound. It might feel very hard and very difficult in the beginning, but I guarantee if you keep at it, if you stay consistent with it, it compounds. Your listening skills get better and better and better over time. So to me, obviously, having lots of exposure to English media contributed tremendously to my listening skills being developed. Remember, you gotta listen to English a lot. But I also want to unpack today some obstacles that learners usually face when it comes to understanding fast English or understanding native speakers in general. Now, the first roadblock, let's say, I would say vocabulary, actually. You know, vocabulary knowledge could be a barrier for you. If you don't have enough vocabulary yet, you might struggle to understand native speakers in media. It might not have anything to do with your listening skills, but with your awareness of certain words and expressions. For example, when it comes to vocabulary, native speakers use a lot of colloquial language in media and in real life. Colloquial language is usually a language that is not learned in traditional textbooks. It's the real English that is spoken in day-to-day life. Let me give you a couple of examples here of colloquial language. The expression pulling an all-nighter, for example. Have you heard this expression? To pull an all-nighter? This means to stay awake till very late at night working on something. For example, I had to pull an all-nighter to finish my presentation for work. You see, so if you are already an intermediate learner of English and you don't know the meaning of this expression, you've never heard this expression before, to pull an all-nighter, this sentence here might have been kind of hard for you to understand at first. Maybe you got the word work because this is a recognizable word for you already, but not the expression. I had to pull an all-nighter to finish my presentation for work. Here's another one. That's out of line. That's out of line. For example, his comments during the meeting were completely out of line. So, if something's out of line, it is not appropriate. So we understand here that the comments he made during the meeting were not appropriate to the situation. They were out of line. But again, if you're not familiar with this colloquial phrase, you might struggle to understand the meaning of the sentence. Got it? We can also talk a little bit about collocations. Collocations in English are basically phrases, combinations of words that go together often in that language, in spoken English in that case. It's a combination of words that native speakers always use in day-to-day conversation. Just to illustrate what a collocation is, listen to this. Which version here is more common for you to hear in day-to-day conversation by native speakers? Fast food or quick food? Fast food, right? So if I say, for example, that McDonald's is a quick food restaurant chain, you might understand what I'm saying, but that's not really the word that is commonly used, quick food. It's better to say fast food, right? McDonald's is a fast food chain, all right? You see, so that's what collocations are about. They're not about necessarily being understood. I get the feeling that even if you use a wrong collocation, a native speaker would understand what you're saying, but the feeling will be weird. It'll be that feeling of, I know what you're trying to say, but that's not really the word we use. We use something else, okay? So another example could be fast shower or quick shower. Which one is more common? Fast shower or quick shower? Quick shower. So I gotta take a quick shower now. It would be okay if I said I gotta take a fast shower now. The native speaker would likely understand me, but the feeling would be weird, like, oh, I know what you're trying to say, but that's not really the word. So I gotta take a quick shower sounds better. These are examples of more basic collocations, okay? Like I said, fast food, restaurant, or a quick shower. But especially if you are already at an intermediate or upper intermediate level, not having knowledge of more advanced collocations might also be a barrier for you when trying to understand native speakers. For example, heightened awareness. That's a more advanced collocation. Heightened awareness. The recent events have led to a heightened awareness of environmental issues. You see, so if you're not familiar with this collocation, you might struggle to understand the sentence. What about this one? Bear a grudge. To bear a grudge. She tends to bear a grudge against people who let her down. You see? So when you bear a grudge against someone, you harbor, let's say, some sort of negative feeling towards that person, some sort of resentment. You resent that person. So she tends to bear a grudge against people who let her down. And we even have here another colloquial phrase, let her down. If somebody lets you down, this person disappoints you. You see, so if you are expecting something like she tends to resent people who disappoint her, it's going to be hard for you to understand native speakers because, usually these are not the words they use. Now, she tends to bear a grudge against people who let her down. That sounds more colloquial, more everyday-like. Still on vocabulary knowledge, we can talk briefly here about phrasal verbs. Knowing a good number of phrasal verbs can definitely help you understand English better. In spoken English by native speakers, phrasal verbs are used frequently. For example, brush up on. To brush up on something. Listen, before the interview, she had to brush up on her technical knowledge. What does that mean? So when you brush up on a skill, for example, it means that you need to refresh that skill or refresh that knowledge. You know about it, you've already learned about it or studied it, but maybe you need an update, you need a refresher, so you have to brush up on that knowledge, on that skill. But you see, it's such a specific phrase that if you don't know it, it's going to be hard to identify it when you hear it in native media, for example. What about crack down on? The government is planning to crack down on tax evasion. The government is planning to crack down on tax evasion. So when you crack down on something, you take severe measures against that thing. So we understand that the government is planning to implement severe punishment, severe measures to fight tax evasion. Cracking down on it. You see, another example of phrasal verb that, if you don't know the meaning, it makes it tricky to understand it, okay? And what about idioms? Of course, idioms. Idioms are those phrases that should not be understood literally. They have something visual about them. They are very descriptive many times, but they usually carry a figurative meaning. For example, to cut corners. To cut corners. They cut corners when building the house, which led to several problems later on. So when you cut corners, you don't really go by the book. You try to take shortcuts when doing something, and you might not be following all the procedures, all the steps. You are trying to shorten the process. You are cutting corners. What about this one? The ball is in your court. I've heard this one so much in movies and TV series. The ball is in your court. For example, I've given you all the information. So now the ball is in your court. In other words, it's up to you. Now you gotta make a decision. You gotta tell me what the next step is. The ball is in your court. So this is definitely a first barrier that I see learners face when trying to understand native speakers. The lack of vocabulary, not knowing enough collocations, not knowing enough idioms and phrasal verbs, not knowing enough colloquial language, colloquial phrases. So it's important that you study new vocabulary, that you practice new vocabulary and you use it so that it becomes something more internalized for you. The wider your vocabulary range is, the higher your chances of understanding native speakers in media and in any situation, really. But here's an extra tip. Aside from vocabulary, remember that understanding native speakers is often related also to processing speed, not just your English knowledge. So yes, having knowledge of the English language, having a good range of vocabulary certainly contributes and helps a lot. But it's not the only thing. You should also worry about your processing speed. How fast are you able to